Theresa May had warned chaos and uncertainty would follow a Commons defeat. Turns out you can get there without that.
We'll be voting tomorrow evening on the withdrawal agreement.
The Prime Minister's confirmed that, so I look forward to supporting her as it goes ahead tomorrow.
Which is 100% happening on Tuesday.
It is.
Right up until late this morning, Theresa May had sent remaining government loyalists into studios to promise the vote would happen tomorrow at 7.
Theresa May has pulled the vote.
Then, suddenly, ministers deployed to defend the line found it had changed.
The vote is definitely off. Alan Duncan, as a member of the government, what do you say? Is that it?
In a telephone conference call with Cabinet, Theresa May said she was postponing the vote and then told MPs the same.
I've listened very carefully to what has been said in this chamber and out of it. To what has been said in this chamber and out of it by members from all sides. From listening to those views, it is clear that while there is broad support for many of the key aspects of the deal, on one issue, the Northern Ireland backstop, there remains widespread and deep concern. As a result, if we went ahead and held the vote tomorrow, the deal would be rejected by a significant margin. We will therefore defer the vote scheduled for tomorrow and not proceed to divide the House at this time.
The Speaker reprimanded the government for pulling the vote so late and said it should reconsider.
Let us see if those who have assured this House and the public over and over and over again that this supremely important vote is going to take place tomorrow without fail wish to rise to the occasion.
The government didn't respond. The Labour leader mocked Theresa May's attempt to get assurances from the EU rather than substantial changes to the deal.
The Prime Minister is trying to buy herself one last chance to save this deal. If she doesn't take on board the fundamental changes required, then she must make way for those who can.
The Prime Minister is promising something better 6 days after she said there was nothing better.
And don't let anyone here think that there's a better deal to be won by shouting louder. Don't imagine that if we vote this down, a different deal is going to miraculously appear. But I am clear, from what I have heard in this place and from my own conversations, that these elements do not offer a sufficient number of colleagues the reassurance that they need. I spoke to a number of EU leaders over the weekend, and in advance of the European Council, I will go to see my counterparts in other member states and the leadership of the Council and the Commission.
Theresa May said she would seek reassurances from EU leaders. Cabinet ministers say she is not expecting to open up the draft treaty itself.
She's going to go and say, can I have some different concessions? But really, nobody here is seriously thinking that there are going to be meaningful concessions without some very unpalatable strings attached.
The Prime Minister has been forced to pull tomorrow's vote in a stunning display of pathetic cowardice. The vote tomorrow night would have shown the will of this House, but this government is focused on saving the Prime Minister's job.
And yet we still, even now, don't even know when she wants to bring this vote back, or even what she wants the deal to be. Does she not realise how chaotic and ridiculous this makes our country look?
She's lost the trust and credibility of the House, lost the trust and credibility of the country, and most importantly, she's lost the trust and credibility of the European Union.
I want to ask the Prime Minister if she thinks that going back and changing minutiae about the backstop is actually going to make any difference to the kind of people on her side who like to go around calling themselves Aslan and circling around her head, caring nothing about this country, but only about their own position.
The thing that is changing is the view of the British people.
No, it's not.
I know it's nearly the pantomime season, but oh yes, it has.
A rare moment of levity in a tense debate. Many of Theresa May's staunchest pro-Brexit critics skipped the event. They're plotting, one cabinet minister said. They smell blood. Delay was meant to buy time, but may not even be able to buy that.
I don't.
Well, we're now joined by 3 MPs. Nicky Morgan, who supports a second referendum.
Well, I don't.
You don't, but I'll come and you can clarify that.
That's incorrect.
Well, let me just do that and I'll come back.
All right.
That wasn't me who said that. Now, Richard Burgon and Andrew Bridgen, a Eurosceptic from the Conservative European Research Group. Now, Nicky Morgan, you're not supporting, so let's not go there. But what I am asking you is, how much of a political sacrifice do you believe you've made in order to support Mrs May on this deal?
Well, I think we've all had to make sacrifices. We all should make sacrifices, because actually what the country now needs is some calm leadership to get to the right place, to try to start to build a consensus and to heal some divisions. It's all very febrile here and very excitable and very good. I understand for the broadcast and everything else, but this is not actually
it's not just
what people
It's not just excitability. This is a dark moment for British politics.
Well, it's a very, very serious moment, and actually we all ought to reflect on that. And this is, I think,
but you're
people
going
in
to
the
continue
country,
to support it come hell or high water.
Well, I think that actually the deal the Prime Minister's put on the table is something that should be supported. I hope very much that she'll be able to go to Brussels, perhaps get some further movement or something, and then be able to bring the agreement back and get it approved, because that's what the country needs.
Richard Burton, you're a Corbynite, effectively. Now, we can't thank Labour for anything in any of this, can we? What part has your party really played in bringing us to this point?
Well, we argued for a meaningful vote, we argued for the necessary transition period, and we also argued that all EU citizens living here should get the right and the security to stay here. So we've led the debate in many ways. But what we've got today is a government running away from democracy. They lost 3 votes last week, they tried to hide legal evidence last week, they were found in contempt of Parliament last week, and now they've actually pulled a vote on the defining negotiated deal of this Prime Minister. People out there aren't excited. People out there are worried.
Well, if we were to ask people out there what Mr Corbyn thinks and what he's ever said about what's going on, they wouldn't know.
Well, they would, because Jeremy and the Labour Party have been clear.
No, Jeremy Corbyn himself.
Jeremy Corbyn has been clear.
Virtually silent.
What he's talked about is a common sense Brexit deal, which actually bring the country together, and with a permanent customs union, a strong single market relationship, and protections for workers' rights, environmental protections, consumer rights, can actually not only command the support of the majority of the House of Commons, actually bring people together.
All very well.
Both people who voted Leave and people who voted Remain.
All very well, but basically Labour have played no part in this. Has been an internal Tory struggle, and you have made no headway whatever, because you could not tell the country what you actually think.
No, we would have defeated the government in this vote today on Theresa May's rotten deal, and that's why the government have pulled it. If it wasn't for effective opposition from Labour trying to bring Leavers and Remainers today, we wouldn't have the Tory party having to put 2 people up to represent their view, one on one side and the other on the other.
Well, I could have put 2 people up to represent your views too.
No, the Labour Party is united in opposition to Theresa May's worst of all worlds deal.
Unfortunately, we never learnt what the Labour Party actually wants of our relationship with Europe.
A permanent customs union, a strong single market relationship, and a guarantee that there'll be no reduction in workers' rights, consumer protections, or in environmental rights.
What is that? I mean, what is it? Is it the Norway? Is it Canada? Is it what?
No, but it's a
doing nothing to achieve that.
It's a bespoke deal for the UK, and Britain certainly deserves better than the shambles that we're being offered today.
Right, Andrew Bridgen, you're right on the right-hand wing of the Conservative Party. What have you done to bring today about?
Well, I think we've tried to avoid it. I mean, from the moment the Chequers proposals were put forward, I've explained to the Prime Minister that that is no basis for an agreement with the European Union for a future relationship that's going to get support in the House. The Prime Minister hasn't listened to me and lots of colleagues, which has sadly led us to today.
But you haven't given her an inch. You've never given her anything, nothing. What have you given her?
Well, what we've given is solutions to the Irish border, which are there to be seen for anyone who wants to see them. And also, Donald Tusk offered us a free trade agreement, a super Canada deal, which would fulfil the mandate we were given to deliver the Brexit the British people voted for, is the best economic outcome and the best sovereign outcome for our Parliament. But the Prime Minister's ignored all of that and has brought us to today.
Right.
She's just jammed the handbrake on as she's faced the brick wall.
Well, we're now in a very, very bad place, where both government and politics in Britain have collapsed. So the question is, what are you going to do to rebuild them?
I'm not sure that the Prime Minister can go and get the deal.
So you want her out?
I put my letter in July. Lots of colleagues have. I think we're heading for
Never
a vote of confidence.
48, however. Never the necessary 48. And you said you had them and you didn't.
Well, if not now, when is the question?
There is one thing where you probably must have some kind of common ground with them, and that is that Mrs May's authority is shot.
Well, I do think that the Prime Minister is in a very difficult position now, and unfortunately
That's a beautiful
become...
way of saying it, but is it shot?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because the honest truth is that a leadership contest over the Conservative Party to inflict not only this current situation, but also a leadership contest on the country now, I honestly think that your viewers and the rest of the country will be thinking we have taken complete leave of our senses. Now, there is no doubt, I think the Prime Minister will have to set a date for her departure sooner rather than later in order to win people over to back either her deal or something approximated that, or perhaps a plan B, which I have been advocating, which is a Norway-type arrangement where I think a parliamentary consensus can be built. But I think that actually to change horses at this stage and to inflict even more uncertain situation would be wrong.
But that's actually what you want to do, isn't it, Richard Burton? You want a general election. You want to get Jeremy Corbyn elected. Why didn't you try and do it today?
Well, our first priority is to stop Theresa May's rotten deal and also to stop a disastrous no-deal Brexit. But of course we want a general election, not only to negotiate a new deal with Europe, but to negotiate a new deal on behalf of people who have been attacked by this ruthless Conservative government and have had their public services attacked too.
You don't even dare call a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
Well, we were talking about bringing a motion of no confidence.
Talking about, but not doing it.
When the Prime Minister loses her vote on her rotten deal. She's kicked the can down the road. It's merely delaying the inevitable. She hasn't yet lost that vote. I believe she will do in due course, because she hasn't got the credibility as a negotiator to negotiate anything better with the European Union. And that's why she should move aside so we can.
Labour is definitely going to call a motion of no confidence. It's just a matter of time.
We'll be pursuing the government, and a motion of no confidence, I'm in favour of bringing one when it's most likely we'll win it. And actually bringing it before the government and before Theresa May has lost her vote would seem strange. Nobody was expecting us to bring it this morning, for example, before the vote was scheduled to take place. The vote hasn't taken place, but she's merely kicked the can down the road and bought herself a few more days or a few more weeks as Prime Minister.
My understanding is that the Speaker gave you an opportunity to start a process of calling a vote on that vote.
Well, we'll be bringing action in Parliament in order...
Tomorrow?
When we have the best chance of winning it.
Well, let's see. That could be next year.
Well, let's see what the Prime Minister comes back with. Anybody knows that one of the most important things in negotiations, whether you're a trade union negotiator, a business negotiator or a political negotiator, is to have credibility. Because she doesn't even have the confidence of her own party, she is not a credible negotiator. This government is not credible. Right. They need to move aside for someone who can get that better deal.
Richard Burton, are you prepared to call a motion of no confidence? And if so, when?
I'm not going to call a vote of no confidence in the government. I'm
well,
thinking...
the ERG, your group, Mr Mogg and the rest.
I think we'll have a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, which is, don't conflate that with a vote of confidence in the government. I would resist that.
Andrew, sorry, I should have I got you too muddled up in terms of Christian names, but surely you can't just separate the Prime Minister from the government.
That's normal procedure.
Well, which is more important, keeping your party in power or getting the deal you want?
Well, getting the deal we want and keeping Jeremy Corbyn out of power is the most important thing for our country. Whatever anyone thinks about the disruption of no deal, the disruption of having Jeremy Corbyn and his far-left policies running our country is far, far greater, and everyone in business knows that.
Andrew Burton, Richard Burton and Nicky Morgan, thank you very much indeed. Apologies for the slight interruption down there, but that's democracy. That's it. Now over to Cathy, who's in the House of Commons. Cathy.
Well, earlier Labour has been discussing the idea of forming some kind of minority government or trying to force a general election with the SNP. So with me now to discuss that is the Westminster leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Some reticence from Jeremy Corbyn, the idea of tabling a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. If he won't, will you?
Well, I think we need to reflect on this position that we're in. We have a government in chaos, a government that lost 3 votes last week, the first time in 40 years that a government's lost 3 votes in a day.
So the perfect opportunity for an opposition party to take a vote.
Because where we're at, we should have been voting tomorrow night on the meaningful vote, a meaningful vote that Parliament voted for. So once again, we've got a government that's in contempt of Parliament. We've got the Prime Minister that's running away from this because she knows that her deal, which doesn't have support, is going to be defeated. Any idea that she's going to be able to remove or fix the backstop in discussions with the EU is simply fanciful.
So I can take that as a yes, that you would table a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister.
I'm asking Jeremy Corbyn to do that in the first instance.
And if he doesn't?
Jeremy is the leader of the opposition. We have the option to do so. I think it's far better that Labour take that initiative. If it's not the case, we have to make sure that at the right time that we are prepared, if necessary, to take appropriate action. But this is a government that's got to be held to account. We need to remember we're talking about jobs, we're talking about the future of Scotland and the whole of the UK, and this is a government which is in crisis.
And we're also talking about democracy. Millions of people voted for Brexit. How would a Labour SNP minority government do any better than Theresa May has done in delivering that deal?
Our first priority is to protect the interests of the people of Scotland. And there is no such thing as a good Brexit. People were not told the truth in 2016, and it's perfectly right and proper. Now that we have more information on any Brexit scenario, jobs are going to be lost, people are going to be poorer. And I've said on a number of occasions that all members of Parliament have got a responsibility to look after the interests of their constituents. Based on the information that we have now, we need to go back to the people, present them with the information and allow them to have that choice of staying in the EU. And myself and the First Minister have said Scotland will not be dragged out. So there are clear red lines that have been crossed in this that we need to deal with.
And let's just look at other powers that you might have at your disposal. Could MPs, for example, instruct the government to revoke Article 50? Is that something that is possible constitutionally?
Well, today's been a good day in as far as we've had the judgment from the European Court of Justice that the government can revoke Article 50. Parliament's got to take back control, and we should be instructing government, instructing the Prime Minister that we are now in a crisis. What we need to do in the short term is make sure we put off leaving the European Union. The best thing to do would be to revoke Article 50 in order that a vote can take place of all the people in the country. We can present them with a vision of the UK staying in on the exact same terms that we have at the moment. That's called leadership.
Ian Blackford, thank you very much for joining us. Well, within the last hour, the European Council President Donald Tusk has said EU leaders will discuss Brexit at an EU summit on Thursday. He declared, "We will not renegotiate the deal, including the backstop, but we are ready to discuss how to facilitate UK ratification." Our Europe editor, Matt Fry, is in Strasbourg. Matt.
Well, Cathy, I'm at the European Parliament here in Strasbourg, and I have to say this is really quite a quiet and sedate place. And one of the sounds you heard today was the sound of people gasping and watching the debate in the House of Commons. Remember, this place used to admire the mother of all parliaments with its cut and thrust and its rough and tumble. Well, today they really think that this has become a mother of all messes. And like everyone in London here, they are wondering, where do we go from here? Because when Theresa May comes to Brussels tomorrow for her urgent talks with Donald Tusk, she herself has said that she doesn't want to renegotiate the deal. Donald Tusk and just about everyone in every language in the European Union has said there will be no renegotiation of the deal. There'll just be a clarification of what's already in the divorce papers, as it were. No one here can see whether that is actually enough to talk the ERG away from their position, to talk any MPs who are opposed to Mrs May's deals away from their current position. So where do we go from here? We're literally facing the unknown. And of course, that is terribly relevant in the UK, but also that's not what they want here as well. They don't want a disorderly Brexit or a no-deal Brexit. That would be very bad news in Strasbourg and Brussels. Now, I've got two guests with me today. Mairead McGuinness is Vice President of the European Parliament, and Philip Lamberts is Head of the Greens in the European Parliament. Welcome to you both. First of all, what is your reaction to what you saw today? Because you were watching the television, weren't you?
We're all glued to the House of Commons, even though we've business to do here. I suppose it's another part of this unfolding story where instead of certainty, there is more uncertainty. The word that struck me from listening to the Prime Minister was reassurance, that the UK colleagues want reassurance. Well, I think we also want reassurance here that the deal which was brokered in honour with the British Prime Minister and the European Union will be honoured. And I hope that those reassurances she seeks will be enough to convince those who are so much against this agreement that they should support it.
But the reason why the deal has faltered is mainly because of the backstop backstop. It's because of the Irish issue. Do you think that Ireland should be doing more to help Theresa May? Because if this deal doesn't happen, the no-deal scenario is a real possibility, and then you get a hard border on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, but let's pull back here a bit. The European Union is committed to the situation of no hard border on the island of Ireland, and that's extremely important to us, and so is the British Prime Minister. And therefore, the idea that we help, of course we want to support to get this agreed so we have an orderly Brexit, but there can be no backsliding on this, absolutely no backsliding, no renegotiation, and I hope, Philippe, you'll also make that point very clearly, that in terms of this Parliament here is fully behind the backstop. And also, the United Kingdom didn't want a Northern Ireland specific backstop.
Okay.
The Prime Minister proposed what she got. Exactly. So it's quite difficult to know what else we can do.
Philip Lamberts, let me put this to you. The ECJ, that was the other big news today out of Luxembourg, ruled that the United Kingdom can unilaterally rescind Article 50 and maintain all the opt-outs that they've accrued over the last few decades and stay inside. That is not a realistic political option, is it?
Well, it depends on what you call realistic. When I'm looking at the British political class at the moment, in its vast majority, I see people who are a bit disconnected from reality. Indeed, what creates a difficulty is the legally binding character of the Good Friday Agreement. That is what needs, what makes it good that Northern Ireland will remain close to the EU, whatever form of Brexit. If the UK wants to stay united, then it's the whole UK that stays close to the European Union. No, I see politicians seeking reassurances. I'm concerned about citizens seeking reassurances, businesses seeking reassurances, and there's only two options on the table. Either Brexit on the basis of the withdrawal agreement or remain. And the ECJ said, if you want to remain, just send a letter to Brussels. Now, is there a political party in the United Kingdom prepared to do that? Well, neither of the big parties are prepared to do that. If they are not able, ask the people.
But there's another option, isn't there? There is the option of no deal at all.
That
can't be disqualified at the moment.
I would disqualify it on the grounds that the United Kingdom, by doing that, would unilaterally breach the Good Friday Agreement. By the way, also breach its legal obligations towards the European Union, because indeed, financial obligations have accrued over the years, which the United Kingdom has to fulfill. Okay. So if the UK wants to become a rogue state, then that's the way to go. But I do not believe that the majority of British citizens want their country signature to amount to nothing on the global stage.
People in this town and in Brussels are very discreet about a second referendum, a people's vote. Do you think that is now the only option for getting Parliament out of this mess?
The option that's on the table is the option we're trying to deal with. The idea of another vote, while I might welcome it and love it, we're different outcome than the first one, is for the British people. I have sympathy with what you're saying,
But are
Philippe,
you worried about the repercussions of that within Britain?
Let me just finish the point. Insofar as if the House of Commons, which is so united in its diversity that it cannot make a decision, and that's the logo here of Europe, but we are united in diversity, then perhaps the option is to ask the British people, but that's not our call. That is a call for the British Prime Minister. We can't make that decision.
Yes, but the deal that everyone keeps talking about, I mean, not everyone, Theresa May does and people in Brussels and Strasbourg, that deal is effectively dead, is it not?
Unless the British people decide that they are happy with that deal. Now, frankly speaking, if I were them, I would much prefer membership, because in terms of regaining control, with membership, you sit at the table where decisions are made.
Do you think that Theresa May will even be Prime Minister when she goes to Brussels? I mean, there are people doubting that as well.
I won't speculate on this.
You won't speculate?
Yeah, I mean, nor would I speculate on it. I have to say she's shown great strength, although today it must have been a difficult moment to pull back from a vote, which we all need to see happening in the House of Commons. Okay. I mean, the uncertainty is bad for everybody.
In the delicatessen shop of different options, we had Canada plus, so some people are talking about EU minus. What about Norway plus? This is something else that's come up.
With respect to that question, can I settle the divorce first?
Yes.
And then we can talk about the future relationship. And that's what we've done. And that's what the British Prime Minister has negotiated. And she was happy with that agreement. She has failed to convince those who want a hard Brexit and those who want to remain that they should support this. So the problem is not here or us deciding what we would offer. It is that the deal on the table has got to be either ratified or what? And that is the question that we find difficult to answer.
Will we get some sort of certainty by Christmas? Yes or no?
I hope so, but that does not depend on the European Union, because either the United Kingdom says, after all, I want to remain. They will be welcome. Or they say we accept the withdrawal agreement and will support it as well.
I don't think we're going to have certainty before Christmas, and I say that with deep regret.
But with certainty, I'm afraid this interview's ended because we've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Maureen McGuinness, Philip Lamberts. Thank you very much. Well, as you can see, an awful lot of politics and diplomacy going on, but it's really very difficult to ascertain where any of this is heading at the moment, other than back to you in London?
One party is crucial to Theresa May's future, and that's the party that she relies on to prop up her minority government, the Democratic Unionist Party. With me now is their Brexit spokesman, Sammy Wilson. Sammy, what does Theresa May need to get from the EU to secure your support for her deal?
Well, she currently has a deal which is legally binding, and that legal bind ensures that Northern Ireland will be tied to the EU single market and customs union and separated from the UK.
But she's
that
made quite
has
clear
to be taken out.
OK, take out the backstop, but she's made clear that she believes and the EU believes it's essential to have it in there to deliver on the promises made in the Good Friday Agreement. So who's going to budge?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you approach negotiations in that way, you're never going to get anything anyhow. But secondly,
Isn't
it is
that
not
how you approach negotiations?
No, it's not. And secondly, this is not essential to the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement doesn't actually mention the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. It doesn't mention the EU, other than that the EU would provide some money to support the Good Friday Agreement. So, this nonsense that she has introduced and allowed to be introduced, first of all, there's a problem along the border, which there's not. Trade can be facilitated across the border. And secondly, that somehow or other the Good Friday Agreement binds her hands is just not true.
But you know what is binding her hands is the EU on one side and you guys and the Brexiteers on the other. So something's got to give, hasn't it? What compromise will you make right now to enable Theresa May to get this deal?
We have already made the compromise, and in December of last year we said, OK, if the backstop is going to be there, here are certain safeguards we want to put in it. Either that there be a termination date, or secondly that the Stormont Assembly would have the final say on what regulations are imposed. She didn't even try to get those into the agreement
and
allowed
did
to be
mention
legally
today
binding.
in the Commons that she'd look at a way of enabling MPs to somehow sort of time limit the backstop in some way. Didn't that give you pause for thought?
No, because MPs could never, ever supersede the legally binding international agreement which the withdrawal agreement constitutes. MPs can vote all they want. They could dance up and down the aisles of Parliament. They could do somersaults through the chamber. It will not make any difference to the fact that legally that we would be obliged to stay within the customs union and the single market. And that's a fatal flaw in any assurances.
So we're completely stuck. Now, Jeremy Corbyn might well possibly table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Can she count on your support, the DUP support?
We have made it clear that until the government is committed to implementing a deal which will break up the United Kingdom and would hurt the Northern Ireland economy, we will continue to work with the government to seek to ensure that this deal is defeated and a deal which is good for the United Kingdom is put in place.
So there's a contradiction there. You want to kill her deal, and yet actually you're giving it oxygen by saying you'll support her in any no confidence
No,
motion.
we're not, because once at the present she can't implement this deal. She can't implement this deal until it goes through Parliament. There's a stalemate at present. So
What's your solution to that stalemate?
It may well be the Prime Minister's intention to implement this deal. But as long as she is unable to do so, then we believe that we should keep this government alive to ensure that a policy is changed. And the only way you can get the policy changed is to ensure that the government doesn't fall.
OK, but actually, you've threatened in the past to pull the plug on Theresa May's government. You've abstained on the budget vote and all sorts of things. But the reality is that you could never stomach Jeremy Corbyn in number 10, could you?
Well,
Someone who's voted for the reunification of Ireland.
Can I make it quite clear? Well, this Prime Minister's deal would bring about the reunification of Ireland.
So you're indifferent whether it's Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May in number 10?
If we're going to be betrayed, it doesn't really matter whether it's Theresa May does it or Jeremy Corbyn does it. The one thing we will not do, however, is connive in our own betrayal. And that's why we have made it quite clear to the Prime Minister that if she gets this deal through Parliament and then tries to implement it, she will not do it with our support. And without our support, she will not be able to get legislation through.
Sammy Wilson, thank you very much for joining us. Well, let's go back now to John, who's outside just a few yards down the road. John.
Thanks, Cathy. Well, the head of the CBI described the Brexit vote delay as yet another blow for companies desperate for clarity, as the news sent the pound crashing and left businesses in even more limbo, unsure of how to plan for the future. Our economics correspondent, Helia Bahimi, has this.
This is what stockpiling in Brexit looks like.
1.25 million Viagra tablets tucked away in a storeroom in Cheshire.
How many do we have in stock of those at the minute?
We've still got a few thousand of these left.
Right.
The government may be in disarray, but this pharmacy is determined to be ready, even if the Prime Minister is not.
So as you can see, we've built up a very large pile of medication for our 130,000 patients. We sell roughly 200,000 per month.
Robbie Tone's online pharmacy sells across the UK, but nearly all his drugs are manufactured in Europe.
It might seem a crazy amount, but in the past, in the pharmacy industry, stock can go short very, very quickly. I think it's a complete mess at the minute. Could you invest at the minute with this uncertainty in business? You couldn't. Would we be doing massive growth plans at the minute? No, you'd be waiting to see what's going to happen. And I imagine that applies to all different sectors of the economy.
It's not just Viagra that's at risk. Many life-threatening illnesses rely on medication produced on the continent, which could be dangerously held up if we crash out of Europe. Latest figures show UK growth has come to a standstill, inching forward just 0.1% in October. Analysts described the figures as proof that the UK economy was being choked by Brexit uncertainty, with business investment stalled, housing transactions slowed, and manufacturing falling sharply. Did you think Brexit could be a good idea?
To be honest, I did. So I did buy into the spin. Looking at it now, as time has continued, and the massive uncertainty and everything that's going on, I would just love it to go away. It would be, I think most people in business especially would love it to go away.
Today markets balked at the political gridlock and the pound nosedived to levels not seen since April 2017. In the business world there was exasperation that there is still no clarity. One FTSE 100 chief executive told me they can no longer plan for Brexit because there are now too many variables. For them, their warehouse turns over stock every single week, so they can't stockpile even if he wanted to. The risk, they say, is that empty supermarket shelves could lead to civil unrest, something he believes the government could not allow.
What the government has told small businesses today is that the future will not be decided before Christmas, that they themselves are not clear on what might happen in the new year, and that they're very sorry they can't actually give small businesses, the people who work for them, a date on which they will be clear. That's about as bad as it can get.
While the denizens of Westminster argue amongst themselves, Christmas cheer is looking more and more elusive. Even Santa may be losing hope that Brexit will deliver anything but coal in our stockings.
Downing Street have literally just issued Mrs May's first calling card tomorrow. She's going to go to the Netherlands to speak to the Prime Minister there, Mark Rutte. Now, Heathrow Airport says it will offer financial support to its workers to help them secure their place in the UK if Brexit does take place. The airport will cover all costs for EU workers seeking settled status, which is due to become available after 2020, which is when Brexit would take place if it does take place. Heathrow will also offer the London living wage and stop using zero-hour contracts.
Well, not yet. Labour have pretty much made it clear they don't want to put down a vote of no confidence until the vote comes back to the House of Commons. Basically, they don't think they can win it right now, and that was reinforced by Sammy Wilson's comments to you earlier from the DUP, saying that they would back the government in the current circumstances. And on the figures, it's very difficult to see how the government would lose a vote of no confidence. Difficult to see Tory backbenchers actually voting against their own government. The other possibility, of course, which was raised by Ian Blackford, is the idea that the SNP might put down a vote of confidence, which would then put Labour on the spot. But I think there's a bit of a puzzlement within Labour about what to do. And of course, even if they were to bring down the government in a vote of no confidence and force a general election, actually Labour's not doing that well in the polls right now, remarkably. I was just looking at some figures for November. The average of the 7 polls for November has the Conservatives 1 point ahead. As for what the government will be doing, Mrs May is off to The Hague tomorrow to see Prime Minister Rutte as part of the start of her European tour to get some changes. Tomorrow MPs will be, instead of this massive debate, the biggest in our lifetimes, instead MPs tomorrow will be discussing Lord's amendments to the ivory bill. Nonetheless, Conservative MPs have been put on a three-line whip from now until Thursday because they're frightened there may be some kind of ambush from the opposition.
And just very briefly, you've just come from the meeting of the ERG, the Tory Brexiteers. What is the state of the Conservative Party now?
Well, I mean, the big unknown at the moment is how many letters have gone in. They were very much burnt.
To topple
Theresa May, or at least have a vote of no confidence. There was all this talk a few weeks ago, it might be near the 48. They don't want to speculate now. They're very cagey about all of that. Jacob Rees-Mogg said, no discussion of leadership tonight. They did discuss the leadership. How far have they got? I mean, there must be letters, there must be MPs tonight thinking of it. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next few days they do reach the 48, because there must be a lot of letters in there that have gone in without the MPs announcing it, perhaps from people on the other side of the party, from Remainers as well as from Brexiteers.
Michael, thank you so much. And John, let's return to you now on the Green.
So whatever happened to voters just want to get on with it? Well, one backbench MP has just said Parliament should be prepared to sit through Christmas to resolve the deadlock. Just one point, and that is that the Cabinet tomorrow has been abandoned because the Prime Minister is going to be in Europe. But joining me now is Matthew Parris, seasoned columnist with The Times.
Hello.
Well, first of all, you were an MP for a time, you've been a columnist for years. Is this the most serious political crisis that you can recall?
Oh, absolutely. I can actually just about recall Suez. This is the most serious political crisis, I think, in my lifetime. All sorts of turbulence I've lived through in Parliament and out of it, but always I've had the idea that somebody knew what was going on. There was a plan. There is the impression now that nobody knows what's going on. There is no plan. It really is chaos.
Is this a failure of personnel in both the Conservative and the Labour parties?
I don't think it is. You know, everyone's blaming Theresa May or blaming Jeremy Corbyn, but the fact is that Britain was promised that we could leave the European Union on terms which would make us more comfortable than when we were in it. The EU was never going to allow that, and if the Archangel Gabriel had been Prime Minister, they might have presented it with a little more panache than she has done, but the Archangel Gabriel would face exactly the same conundrum, and that's what you saw this afternoon.
Is there a probability, a danger, whichever way you want to put it, of another referendum?
I think there is a possibility of another referendum, but I think the chaos has got to become more apparent before people will turn to that. There's a real reluctance.
But that could be chaos in and of itself, as Mrs May keeps saying.
Yes, it could. And there's a reluctance, having asked people once, to ask them again. And a referendum campaign would be a nasty business. But what else is there to do?
Well, was 48 to 52 bound to end in tears?
If there had been an easy way forward, I think people would have accepted 48 to 52, well, the 52 win. It has proved there is no easy way forward. Indeed, it's proving there is no way forward at all, in which case the narrowness of the margin then really begins to chafe.
The extraordinary thing is that we're learning all sorts of things at this sort of 25th hour that we never knew before. That, for example, more money is spent on Northern Ireland than is spent on being a member of Europe.
Yes. Our net contribution to Europe is less than that to Northern Ireland. Nobody knew about, I think, the Good Friday agreements, arrangements with the border, or the promises made for the border. All those things we are now talking about over tea. We didn't know 2 years ago.
And one of the things people don't probably know is that the Northern Ireland Agreement itself is structurally bound into our membership of the European Union.
Yes, it is. And I noticed, I was interested in what a lot Theresa May made of that this afternoon. She didn't say that the backstop arrangement is just a regrettable necessity. It's an awful nuisance. We don't want it, but they've forced it on us. She actually made a principled case for a backstop arrangement, and at the same time as saying that she was going to try and negotiate some tweaks to it. Sounds to me as though she doesn't intend or believe that anything much more can be done.
Matthew, I'm going to put you on the mat. What's going to happen?
I think the 48 votes of no confidence in her leadership will happen in the next 2 weeks. Continuing the pantomime analogy which you started before the break, I think look behind you is the advice now to Mrs May.
What is that, Boris?
No, I don't think so.
Matthew Parris, thank you very much indeed.